Sumandasa and Mr. Sirisen Amarasekara. Please take your seats, sir. Before we commence today's proceedings, I would like to play a small introductory video regarding the Gamini Korea Foundation and its project, the Sri Lanka Innovators Forum.
The Sri Lanka Innovators Forum, SLIF, is an initiative of the Gamini Korea Foundation aimed at meaningfully contributing towards resolving the complex economic issues confronting the country today. The Gamini Korea Foundation was founded to take forward the passion of Dr. Gamini Korea to achieve just and equitable economic development in all countries. The late Dr. Gamini Korea was an internationally renowned Sri Lankan economist and an outstanding product of the universities of Cambridge and Oxford. Born on the 4th of November 1925 to Dr. C.V.S. Korea and Freda Korea, sister of Sir John Kotalavala, the then Prime Minister of Ceylon. Dr. Gamini Korea's grandfather and granduncle were the famous freedom fighters from Chilo, Victor Korea, who was a member of the Legislative Council of Ceylon, and Charles Korea. His uncle, Sir Claude Korea, was as at the forefront of Sri Lanka's entry onto the world stage at the independence and for many years thereafter. Gamini Korea was educated at the Royal College Colombo, after which he started his higher education at the University of Ceylon in 1944 before going to study at Corpus Christi College, Cambridge and Nuffield College, Oxford from 1945 to 52. There he obtained 2 BAs and MAs from the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge and a DPhil from University of Oxford. He was the first Sri Lankan to obtain a doctorate in economics. He was also the first Sri Lankan to obtain a doctorate from Oxford University in any subject. He was a key member of the Planning Committee for Sri Lanka's first 10-year plan, 1959, which sought to raise economic growth and reduce poverty. Among his numerous achievements was his appointment as the Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, where he negotiated the terms of the Loam Convention, a landmark agreement providing development and access to European markets to Africa and the Caribbean. He was an early proponent of the equitable development who worked tirelessly for trade and development in developing countries. The Gamini Korea Foundation provides opportunities for meaningful economic engagement through rigorous multidisciplinary research to promote inclusive and sustainable development. The Gamini Korea Foundation, an autonomous non-profit institution, is committed to making a real and lasting difference in the lives of vulnerable people. The Sri Lanka Innovators Forum, SLIF, has been conceptualized by Gamini Korea Foundation to bring about change and infuse innovation into the processes of democratic governance and sustainable economic development. It aims to pursue in-depth research and dialogue, focusing on core sectors that need to be addressed and suggest innovative, results-oriented policy strategies to resolve the current economic crisis. The Sri Lanka Innovators Forum will bring together the like-minded thought leaders and industry stakeholders to discuss, debate and agree on pressing issues in a variety of sectors and devise alternative, sustainable economic models, processes and practices. A group of thought leaders who are also subject experts have been assigned to review the issues papers and provide necessary guidance and relevant research material to the respective authors. SLIF will transcend boundaries and barriers and invite specialists from all over the world to contribute their expert views and knowledge to enable Sri Lanka to face its current challenges effectively. 20 identified sectors have been assigned to experts to research and write issues papers on contemporary issues which have an impact on socio-economic development. The discourse will commence with questions that should be raised on good governance and administrative reforms. The other topics are tourism, export-oriented industrial development, macroeconomic policy, poverty reduction, reforming Sri Lanka's state-oriented enterprises, Sri Lanka's electricity and petroleum industry, Sri Lankan food crops, livestock and fisheries, transportation and highways, education, healthcare, shipping and logistics, international trade and investment, subnational policies, environment, women and development, ethnicity and socio-economic development, information technology, and foreign policy. The outcome of these issues papers forms a blueprint to be presented to policymakers as a landmark contribution from the Gamini Korea Foundation towards strengthening the economic recovery of Sri Lanka. You are invited to join the Sri Lanka Innovators Forum by logging on to the Gamini Korea website. Fill in the registration form, choose an area of expertise where you would like to share your knowledge, advice, and comments on the issues papers posted under each thematic area. Sri Lanka Innovators Forum, beyond the barriers of tradition.
Thank you very much. I would like to now invite our chairman, Dr. Lloyd Fernando, to give the welcome speech. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sohan, for inviting me, but I have no role to play. I'm just to say thank you for your presence here today. It's very encouraging. And I'm very happy that Reverend Vimalaratna, in spite of all his work, particularly in the Sri Lanka Economic Association, there's a load of work being done there, and he agreed to come today and chair this session. I also want to thank all the panelists for being here. I'm not going to say anything about the program now because it's all there and I don't want to waste your time. I will come back later on if the need be, once the discussion goes on. So may I just ask Reverend Vimalaratna to take over from here onwards.
Test.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Dr. Lloyd Fernando, for the introduction about me. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have gathered here for another thought-provoking session. Gamini Korea Foundation, a well-known foundation in Sri Lanka, is famous for its policy-oriented research. Sri Lanka Innovators Forum is an offshoot of Gamini Korea Foundation. The foundations have selected 20 areas, 20 main areas to do policy papers, not just to accumulate the knowledge, not just academic papers as I understood. The ideas presented in papers should be able to translate into practice, giving necessary guidance to policy makers. Today's paper is the fourth one. Third papers, 3 papers presented in the past. Today, this evening, we are focusing on subnational planning. Well, when we look at the world, globalization is going on. We are living in closely connected world. And mainstream policy, market mechanism, it is also going on. In addition to that, some countries in the world is still following planning. For example, China. That country is following 14th plan now. National plans are there, subnational plans are there. Subnational level is extremely important when we look at complicated socio-economic issues in many countries, especially in developing countries. Well, with those initial remarks, I would like to invite our key person today, well-known professor, not professor, sorry, well-known person. He is suitable for the position. Well, Chadrasena Maliyadde. He is going to make the presentation first on subnational planning. Based on his presentation, we have eminent panelists here. They will present their ideas. Traditionally, when you invite somebody to make a presentation, you have to introduce him to the audience. Here in this particular case, I do not think that is essential. He is well-known administrator, well-known writer, council member of number of universities. Well, Maliyadde Mahatmaya, you do not want any introduction. Everyone here in this audience knows about you. So, I cordially invite you to make your presentation to start our productive discussion today. Floor is open to you. Thank you.
Well, Reverend Professor Vimalaratana, who is chairing this session, and Dr. Lloyd Fernando, President of Gamini Korea Foundation, and the eminent panelists, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. And I was wondering as to why Zohan invited Hamudro to chair this session. I know he is a scholar, he is an expert in the regional development, but the other reason is you saw his introduction, how he introduced me, so generous. So that would have been the reason why he wanted to invite Venerable Professor Vimalaratana. So with that, Hamudrone, you have pushed me to the wall. Two things. One is there is an eminent panelist, and there is a distinguished audience, and you have asked me to narrate what went on during 900 months within 1800 seconds. So it's a difficult task considering my vocabulary limitations as well as what had happened and what had not happened. And also I would like to say that this there would have been some questions as to why I have been invited to make this presentation. I retired from the public service about nearly 2 decades ago, and that was the time Mr. Amarathekara, myself, Mr. Gunasinghe, Dr. Ratnayak, and all of us, and Mr. Anuradha Kumar Thiri, we were involved in the regional planning or the subnational planning. So that was 2 decades ago. So am I the fitting person to make this presentation? There would have been so many changes in the country as well as outside the country. So with that, maybe our knowledge is obsolete. But still, I thought that I would take the challenge and do it. So with this, I would like to make my presentation. First of all, I was wondering as to how I should start this. I thought that I would briefly mention what the subnational planning or the subnational development is. And I browsed through the internet, referred to certain literature, and also consulted the people like Dr. Ganeshamurthy. And still, there have been many interpretations, many definitions. So I thought I would take the easy path and an interrelated process of economic, social and political development in a particular area. So particular area or a region, we used to call it region, and it is occurring below the national level. So nation state is above, and this is a subdivision of sub-area of the nation with a spatial framework. So this is the easy, the safe way of introducing the subnational development, and it's a dynamic process, changing with time, region, emphasis and the priorities. And I don't think there is any one-size-fits-all model for the subnational planning. I can see Mr. Amarathekara is nodding his head, maybe in agreement. And then we talk of a region now, region within the nation. So then what do you mean by region? So I have given few regions identified in Sri Lanka. Now region is a subdivision carved out within a nation. And then there are some regions which are identified with the administrative boundaries. Now in Sri Lanka it is the districts and the divisional secretary divisions. Then there are political boundaries. If you take in Sri Lanka again, provincial councils and the local authorities. Then historical boundaries, Ruhunu, Maya, Pihiti and all that. Then there are agroclimatic zones, wet zone and dry zone. And ethnic concentration, Tamil homeland, Muslim dominant, Kandyan peasantry, estate sector. So regions, there are some, now these are going by certain boundaries, political, administrative, agroecological, agro-geopolitical. But there are certain regions identified for a purpose. Now I have mentioned here Mahavalley. Now Mahavalley is a trans-basin project cutting across several provinces, divisions and districts. So there was no such region, but for this purpose, Mahavalley development, a region was identified. Now, Sri Lanka is a small country with 22 million people, and we have a good infrastructure network. You can reach most of the destination within 5 or 6 hours, maybe not during the fuel crisis period, but now. And so then why do we need this subnational planning in Sri Lanka? Is there a justification? Now, it's not a large state like Australia or any other country, so this is a tiny island, do we need? So one is, I have given out some reasoning or justification. One need to hold stagnation. Now, some regions, some districts or some areas are stagnant due to various reasons. But regional development or the subnational development is introduced to hold the stagnation of those areas. There are certain areas which have been identified for subnational development to drive the development process. Then also certain areas are not stagnant but growth is slow. And also there is a need to ensure, accelerate the growth outside Colombo metropolitan region. Now Colombo metropolitan region is the fastest growing as well as the most grown district or the area in the country. So outside areas are lagging behind. So we have to accelerate the growth. Then other one is to mitigate center-periphery imbalances, inter-regional disparities, unequal distribution of development dividends, unequal distribution of development dividends. Then the poverty. Now, this is an issue for the less developed districts or the areas as well as the metropolitan area. Now, we know Colombo is congested, there is pollution, parking is a problem, there are sewerage issues, there are storm water drainage issues. So it is not only a problem to the less developed or non-developing districts or the areas, also to Colombo. So this is why we have to thin out the population or the activities to other areas. Now there have been efforts in Sri Lanka to do that, to take the administrative capital away from Colombo metropolitan region. Then to harness resources and potential unique to each region. Now if you take any region, there are certain potential, resource endowment, talents, skills and various benefits which can be harnessed, but due to reasons they have not been exploited. So it does not mean that there are lack of resources. Resources are there, but they are moving out of that. So therefore, we have to make sure that we would harness the resources and the growth potential available within the district or within the area to ensure that area is developed, and also this migration and moving out resources will not occur. Then to address issues unique to the region. So there are issues unique to certain regions due to various reasons. It may be economic reasons, infrastructure reasons, the monetary reasons, and also lack of interest. So, but subnational development efforts interventions are introduced to take these regions out of the present situation. Then to enhance the region contribution to GDP. Now this is something we have to bear in mind. Usually we look at the region as a problem area and think that we must bring that region up to the level or closer to the more developed regions. But what we hear is, the national GDP or the GDP is contributed by the sectors as well as the regions. So usually we talk of the sectors. I think Mr. Kumar Thiri, the Director General National Planning, will say that the agriculture sector, the manufacturing sector, the industry and the services sector contribution to the GDP, but we usually do not talk much about the contribution, region contribution to the GDP. But that is important because GDP consists of many contributions, many sectors. One is the sector contribution, other one is the region contribution. Usually we don't look at region development or subnational development as a contributory factor, contributory area effort to the GDP. Then I would like to go through the history, the Sri Lankan experience in subnational development. Now initially with the independence, and since independence, all the governments responded to the demands coming from periphery. In addition to Colombo, basically periphery. At that time, I think you all will agree, there were no special efforts made for peripheral development, but there have been district units of the central agencies, the ministries, departments and other agencies set up in the districts, and those units, I think the district secretary headed the units, and they basically attended to the administrative and other revenue earning matters, but later these district units were entrusted with the responsibility of development. But initially they were basically for administrative purposes to carry out certain activities identified by the center in that particular district. Then I mentioned about the Candian Peasantry Commission because I read that immediately after the independence, there were certain protests made by Candian leaders that the Candian area, this Candian peasantry was affected by the estate development. Their land were taken by the estates, and they complained that their paddy fields and their growing cultivable areas were taken by them. Therefore, they wanted special concessionary programs in Candian area, and the government appointed a Candian Peasantry Commission. And later it was converted to a Candian Peasantry Department, and since of late it had been there, but later it took various other forms. But Candian Peasantry Department and the Commission were there. Then the opening of dry zone with irrigation schemes. Now there have been several schemes, the river basin development and colonization schemes, Galway, Kalaoya, then Wallaby Basin and various other areas which have been abandoned, neglected, were rehabilitated, Senayak Samudra and all that, and they were taken, they were not specific subnational development programs, but they had many elements of the subnational development. And there was an impetus to various other activities, infrastructure development, and then certain livelihoods were created, and people were transferred from a wet zone to these newly developed areas. So all that happened. Then regional industry estates. Now this is another program implemented by the Industrial Development Board, which was established in 1969. Now industrial estates were established in the peripheral areas. I do not know whether it is in the text, whether it is identified as the subnational development project, but there was an impact on the subnational development. They were located in areas where, and as a result of that, there were development in the infrastructure and various other facilities, and also people were attracted, people got employment, all that happened. Therefore, I listed them as one experience, one project under the subnational development. Then subnational development since 1970. There was a massive emphasis on subnational development in 1970 with Sirimava Bandaranaike government, Professor H.J.D.S. Gunasekara as the Secretary, Minister of Planning and Economic Affairs, introduced a 6-year, 5-year development plan. One of the main pillars was this regional development. And he established a regional development division in the ministry, and also regional development units or district planning units in each district. And I think most of these gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen who are here have worked in these district planning units, and they did not have much experience or knowledge on the regional development, but they are from these peripheral areas. Most of the graduates at that time were coming from the central schools, the peripheral areas, and they had the need as well as they knew the weaknesses as well as the strengths of those areas. So using that, they also harnessed the support of various other technical agencies, and then established large number of DDC projects which were financed by the government, but in all over the island, many items were produced and employment were generated, and that program is the first of that kind in Sri Lanka. And with the electoral defeat of Sirimava Bandaranaike government, that program came to a halt, that program was thrown out. Then there are certain areas where, you know, that from time to time government has made attempts to introduce the political, I don't say the political intervention, but get the politician, the political representatives involved in the subnational efforts. In 1973, district political authority system was introduced to get the political representatives involved in the subnational efforts. Then in 1974, decentralized capital budget was introduced. In 1978, district minister system was introduced. Then in 1980, the district development council, and in 1987, the provincial council. The provincial council is a recent development, but provincial council is the most powerful and constitutional arrangement. With that, the political authority, the political representatives got involved in the subnational development efforts. Then now I mentioned this. The concept of subnational development since 1970, I mentioned. Then in 1977, with the change of the government, there were few national projects came up. One is the Greater Colombo Economic Commission. Other one is the UDA projects, UDA programs, urban development programs, free trade zones, initially Katnayaka and Biyagama, then Mahaweli Development Project. These were national projects, but area-based. But there was also this 1 million housing development program introduced by then Minister in charge of the housing. And IRDP came as another pillar.
5 minutes more, thank you.
Sorry, how many? 5 minutes. More? Yes. I have taken 25 minutes. Okay. So I will fast track. And then I told you that you have given me a impossible task to cover 900 days affair within 1800 seconds. Anyway, thank you very much. And then the provincial councils were established. Then the Janasavi and apparel industry program was introduced. Now, they were not subnational development, but they had elements of subnational, because especially apparel industry program came as growth centers. And they developed the area with some infrastructure facilities as well as the access, and then also generated employment opportunities. Then the Regional Economic Advance Program, architect is here, Mr. Amarathekara. That was during Mrs. Chandrika Kumaratunga's time. She wanted to do away with the IRDP program and then this integrated rural development program, and then introduce to assist the promote the enterprise development. Then the establishment of dedicated economic centers is also a kind of a subnational development program, starting with Badulla. Then Mahaweli region. Now these are area based. I have not mentioned the IRD, integrated rural development program, and that program was introduced in 1977. And there have been pluses and minuses, but there have been so many new items, positive impact. The social mobilization program was introduced, then the women empowerment, then micro credit programs, then access to various resources. Then also it introduced new planning techniques. It's a dynamic program, and also it's a kind of exciting program with certain drawbacks, but it was a more progressive subnational development program, district-based, and using the district resources and addressing the district issues. And also there have been planning exercise going on in the district. But I can remember late Professor Buddhadasa Hevavitana said, IRDP is neither integrated, no regional, no development. That was his remarks. I don't know how true it is, but anyway, Now there have been some area-based subnational development programs. I have listed them: Mahaveli region development, in southern area development. There have been studies, there have been efforts, there have been programs introduced. Then the Udara development, then Magampura development is another one with this southern corridor, the expressway, the port as well as the airport. Then urban development, then town and country planning, national physical planning, then this 2003 concept of region development, not the regional, region development introduced by Ranil Wickremesinghe government, short-lived. And performance, if you look at now, if you look at the regional development, we have a wide range of experience, failures, drawbacks, success stories, all are there, and we have used different concepts, different modes, different implementation arrangements and approaches. Then, but still I saw somewhere that in Sri Lanka, subnational development is an unfinished job, business. Then we have failed to promote the development at the subnational level. There have been interventions, but we have not been able to bring down. It is still the Western development, Colombo metropolitan region based development. 40% of the GDP is still contributed by the Western region. Then the failure of provincial council to change the dominance and the growing polarization of Western province. Then the absence of a clearly defined national policy. There is no national policy on region development. I can remember I was rather worried when I was the director of the region development. Then I went, the then Director General and the National Planning Department used to publish this public investment program. And there was no reference to the regional development or the subnational development in this. So there was one Dr. Lloyd Fernando heading that division. I went and met him, and I said, Lloyd, now look, you know, this is, sorry, how?
5 minutes up.
5 minutes up, okay. There is no reference to this. Then he said, okay, he listened to me and said, okay, let's see. So I came half-hearted, but next PIP came out with a special chapter on the region development. I don't know whether Mr. Kumarathiri is continuing that, but anyway, he gave a lot of prominence to that. There have been things, you know, this some drawbacks of this: lack of concern for spatial aspects, inward looking, absence of the private sector, lack of capacity at the subnational level, the lack of clarity. We talk of subnational development in various forms. Then a future tension I have that there is a need to have a national policy for subnational development. Then also we have to look at the macro targets and bring the subnational development within this macro framework. Then there should be a wholesome approach instead of a piecemeal approach. Overlay physical and economic plans with each other, strengthening institutional framework. I will stop there because Hamdru is threatening me. Thank you very much for the time, extra time given. And I can clarify if there is any further issues. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Chadrasena Maliyadde Mahatmaya. Well, Mr. Chadrasena Maliyadde laid the foundation for the building. Now, panelists, it is your turn to construct the building. Simple idea is this: Gamini Korea Foundation is well known for its policy-oriented research work. So, if our eminent panelists can contribute important ideas based on what Maliyadde Mahatmaya presented or beyond that, those ideas would be useful for our policy makers to incorporate them to their future subnational planning and also national level planning. We have eminent 5 panelists here. I have been given a list about them. I follow the list. Number 1, Mr. Hemantha Jayasundara. It's a well-known, highly recognized, educated gentleman in Sri Lanka. He has done his first degree, master's, in addition to that involved in urban, national, regional planning. He has got a vast experience in those areas. In addition to that, he had worked as a lecturer and trainer in the urban planning sector in Sri Lanka, having lectured at the University of Moratuwa, the University of Jaffna, city schools of architecture, so many. So I am not going to take that much time. You are well known, educated, specialist in that particular area. I invite Mr. Hemantha Jayasundara to make his ideas first. Thank you. Yes, you can go over there or you can use this mic.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and I consider I am honored to be here. Because of an event that is organized to remember one of the greatest intellectuals of our motherland who had a global presence. Coming back to the discussion today, is somewhat controversial. Controversial particularly due to global development trends that took place in 1970s, which continuously got revolutions and which continuously get rapid changes, particularly due to third and fourth industrial revolutions. So my comments will have 3 kinds of aspects. My comments will have 3 kinds of aspects, but they will not be listed in accordance with the different sub-themes, but they will be mixed together. Firstly, I hope most of you all are aware that in 2012, National Physical Planning Department prepared the first National Physical Plan in Sri Lanka. In fact, that's one of that kind in this region, Asia region. That was a deliberation of 2.5 years of work by a multidisciplinary team, which was approved by the government, and it has, I consider that as one of the key outcomes to clearly address the subject that he spoke about, the regional development. It had identified 5 metro regions and 9 metro cities. And all the development aspects, economic, social, environmental, all those kinds were very seriously considered. More importantly, it seriously considered the environmental impact that we are going to face due to climate change. Many of us, we discuss and well recorded climate change impact is sea level rise and low-lying areas going underwater. But what is not spoken widely is that wet areas getting wetter and dry areas getting drier. That was very clearly addressed in this National Physical Plan. Based on that, obviously we will face earth slides, landslides, earth slips, floods, everything based on the central climate zone, and then dry zones will have no facility to sustain its agriculture. So based on that, it proposed trans-basin water transmission system. But however, this plan was not seriously considered other than couple of projects that took place, particularly the Southern Expressway and Hambantota development. it also considered high-speed rail and road transport system to integrate all those 9 metro cities. That was again based on one of the findings of the University of Maratua. They found in the ancient time we had the road, a circular road, that exactly located on the contour that separated low-lying area, that is lowest peneplain, from the middle peneplain. Meaning the development is directed towards the area that are more sustainable development and to keep sensitive areas untouched, that is central hills and coastal areas. So all this is considered and that was produced. I think that was the major interventions by professionals particularly, and politicians came later for approval. Unfortunately, it was not fully implemented, and moreover, during, I'm sorry to mention, the Yahapalana government, they wanted to change it just for political agenda, and this government again being changed for another political agenda without implementing. The third one is that Sri Lanka is, everyone knows, is the country having highest biological diversity in Asia. However, within this, we urban planning professionals, we consider the primary driver being cities, primarily because cities are considered to be engines of national development. Unfortunately, it is not seriously considered in our national planning other than the National Physical Plan. If you consider statistics, the countries which are having the largest urban population produce the largest per capita income. Consider all these: Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, all, Malaysia, Thailand. So they take a deliberate effort to urbanize their countries. There are many reasons. I am not going to discuss those reasons because there's limited time. And also the chairman is next to my seat, so I'm a bit scared about it. However, one of the key issues that even Mr. Maliyadde pointed out differently is that we have serious separation between spatial planning and economic planning. Economic planning is managed by Ministry of Finance, and spatial planning is managed by another ministry. So much so, I have so much of pain. Mr. Amar Singh is there to witness. When I produced the first plan to develop the first information technology park in Maliyadde, when we went to the National Planning Department, I was almost threatened. I got a letter from the Secretary to the Minister of Finance saying that Sri Lanka does not have a demand for IT. Who wrote this? Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Sri Lanka does not have a demand for IT, and Maliyadde has enough in IT infrastructure. Therefore, we don't support this project. I was about to go to courts. Fortunately, I knew Mr. Parsalingam. I got Mr. Parsalingam to change that letter. Therefore, I escaped from going to courts. So this dichotomy between national economic planning and national physical planning has completely put our country on a reverse gear. Now, the next item that I would like to cite here is that we, according to the ADB's publications, it's very true, we undergo 3 stages of economic development. Stage 1, comparative advantage level. Stage 2, competitive. Stage 3, Stage 3, collaborative. We are now undergoing comparative advantage level, Sri Lanka mostly. Here, what is more important is competitiveness. There are various ways to measure competitiveness, competitive indicators and collaborative indicators, more than 50, 60. How far we are competitive. But in this competitive environment, what is more important is nothing other than competitiveness. How best we can compete with other countries. There are various examples, and I have been working in this sector, but if someone questions, I can answer this. I'll give you a simple example. When UDA started the first urban regeneration project, where we had high rises, one perch of land was advertised for less than $1 at that time, roughly about 35 rupees per perch.
I can give you one more minute.
Okay, right. So I will answer most of the question during Q&A time. And in the future, definitely what will drive the economy is competitiveness and governance. Now, coming back to some of the key areas that Mr. Maliyadde mentioned, every success government he mentioned that has invested heavily in strengthening Western province, which is to some extent not true, because every successful government in Sri Lanka invested heavily in rural development without understanding the significance of urban sector in the national economic development throughout. There are many reasons for that. Secondly, of course, he created many interesting facts, which is true. The population always concentrates in places of economic activities. Yes. That is the main reason as to why we should understand the significance of the subject. One of the best examples I would cite is Hambantota, which is the second best opportunity that we missed heavily. I'm not going to discuss that again because of the time limitation, but please ask me a question, I will answer. Hambantota project was never in the political agenda. No politician knew about it. It was first advocated by professionals and continuously advocated by professionals by using their own money. Politicians came later, and we made a huge blunder without understanding the significance of Hambantota project. We once got down Professor Molena, who was highly regarded professionals in Netherlands, who developed Netherlands ports, whole main port, and made it one of the global ports. After we took him to Hambantota, he told me, I have never seen stupid people like Sri Lanka. They are seated in a gold mine, referring to Hambantota harbour. I'll discuss later if you question me. And we missed the greatest opportunity we had before. Right. I think I will stop at this point to keep to time limitations, but I prefer to answer any questions during discussion time.
Well, thank you very much, Hemant Jayasundar Mahatmya. You have taken extra time, but there is no penalty at all. Now, I am turning to the next panelist, Mr. W.A.D.S. Gunasinghe. Mr. Gunasinghe, an experienced special grade officer of the Sri Lanka Planning Service, has been appointed as a new general manager of Sri Lanka Railway, and he has served as the additional secretary to the president. Yes, Gunasinghe Mahatmya, over to you.
Good afternoon, Reverend Professor and the eminent panelists and distinguished invitees. First of all, my intervention, speech will be rather short, highlighting some points rather than, giving comprehensive analysis of the report. First of all, let me thank the organizers for inviting me for this event and the discussion, and I'm honored to be here among high calibers of development policymakers, scholars, and practitioners gathered here. More importantly, I am delighted to participate in this forum, since the author of the paper is one of our mentors, especially when it comes to the area of subnational or regional development, as we used to call it. However, as I see, the paper itself is focused on identifying the scope of subnational development planning domain within the development discourse. I mean, subnational level development among other concepts like regional development, rural development, perhaps also agriculture development. I observe the topic is much more relevant today, at least for two reasons. Though the regional development has almost not been highlighted in the present development agenda, at least in our country. Firstly, we have a legacy of regional development interventions over the decades, since perhaps 1970s, sometimes using different models. And there is a great deal of analysis on those in the paper. I'm not going to much elaborate on that. However, the irony is the outcome of this and the substance outcome and the sustainability of those interventions and efforts are in a big question. Secondly, with the economic downturn of the country we are confronting today, we are compelled to revisit the overall development agenda of the country of the recent past, to me, which was mainly comprises of external factor-driven strategies rather than based on the comprehensive policies made, taking the pros and cons of the current economic structure as well as external factors into consideration. The paper elaborates various interventions made by the government time to time. Some of them are across the board. As I see, one of the shortcomings of the interventions like garment factory initiatives, or if you take free trade zones, are generally in these, mostly forward linkages have been adequately developed, and compared to that, backward linkages were less developed. We observe that for the development of the periphery, or I mean in the regions, the backward linkages development is more important. One of the other issues is, for instance, most of the FTEs, I mean pre-trade zone projects are on turnkey ventures without having much impact on the expected outcomes like technology transfer. I would like if this point will be taken into account in this analysis. Our industrial policy seems to have overlooked this aspect, though the rural industrialization was one of the explicit as well as implicit policy interventions. In short, small industrials remain over the time without expansion or having links with the large industries. The paper underscores the impact of influence of Western development theories on policy making, while appreciating the point and admitting the point that grossly replication of models from other countries would not work. It is useful to have and give analysis of some of the theories adopted by us and their applicability or maybe inapplicability. Personally, I feel that some of the theories, especially those which are pertaining to especially institutional development in the broader sense, has been overlooked by the policymakers. I can remember at a much later point of our career, some people were bold to say that government role in regional development is just to provide water supply, electricity, and also roads. Decentralization issues has been discussed in the paper and the main weaknesses have been widely identified. Here, I would like to point out that the government role in general has been changing over the time from an investor or welfare provider to a facilitator and regulator. Also looking at the people as not as just a beneficiary but as a citizen or a partner. At the center, this was happening to a certain extent, but in the periphery, this role remains somewhat unchanged. For this reason, the provincial and local authorities seems in general failed, especially to facilitate the private sector and attract investment, and more importantly, analyze the investment and trade potentials in their respective localities or areas. This aspect has been discussed in the paper, but I feel that more elaboration is needed, especially with regard to identifying the role of regional planner or subnational level planner. For instance, my first workplace in mid-90s, Alla Divisional Secretariat in Badulla district. I mean, we have tried to increase the income of the rural population by various means, such as introducing commercial agriculture, value-added products, as well as SMEs and so forth. But the progress was very poor. But after several decades, at least 3 decades, we can see that Al has been developed as a tourist hub in the hill country, creating more jobs, income, etc. And I guess without without much intervention from the government as well. But we must admit that the railway was instrumental in it, as I see. The paper, while analyzing past experience of our country, states that ambiguities of the approaches of subnational level development initiatives. While agreeing with those points, let me say our question is developing the right model, taking the current social and political aspects into account.
1 more minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm there. Thank you. The paper highlights the factors to be taken into consideration in developing such model. Maybe the next step is to prescribe an appropriate model. In this, the discretion levels in decision making, the scale and the institutional aspects have to be clearly identified. For this purpose, looking at appropriate international best practices as well as domestic will be very useful. Perhaps our own experience with regional development mentioned in the paper, and as far as I know, brainchild of the author of this paper, perhaps I don't know, sir, needs to be revisited. As far as I heard, maybe other I mean, sirs are there. Ladies and gentlemen, the title of the paper is Issues on Subnational Policy Planning. Important question here is about subnational policies, whether such policies should be a subset of national policies or should be a separate policy area on its own. The paper makes us to think over this question. Finally, I appreciate that the paper is very concise and well focused on the issues. And I must thank with respect Maliyadde sir for bringing this important issue to this table. And thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunasinghe, WADS. Now, next panelist, Dr. M. Ganeshamurthy, Senior Lecturer from the Department of Economics, University of Colombo. He deserves the professorship, but he is not applying it. I always asking, now you are too late. Why are you not applying for your professorships? He is postponing always. Well, he received his first degree from the University of Peradeniya, and postgraduate first from the University of Colombo, PhD from Radboud University of Netherlands. Dr. Ganeshamurthy, floor is open to you now. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And without having a customary remarks, I'll just enter into the subject matter. I have read the entire article this morning and took some notes on the important points, but I have given 10 minutes, so 10 minutes, within 10 minutes, I don't think that we can make a fair justice to the topic. Anyway, only a few highlights I would like to make. I know Mr. Maliyadde quite well. He's a very able person to write, narrate things. And I also know there are some policymakers and also bureaucrats, well experienced and with conversation in English, but they don't write. We as academics, we teach regional development for the master's course. I have been teaching this subject for more than 10-15 years right now. So we usually search. But for this subject, they're very rare anyone who is from the planning ministry writing anything on that. With regard to this regional development perspective, I trace some information, and before we gain independence, from the bill which has presented in the UK Parliament to grant independence to Sri Lanka. So it has some concern over the regional development disparities over there. If you want, you can just search for the Hansard of the UK government on Ceylon independent bill. So you'll find those information. And since then, the first World Bank report on Sri Lanka and the papers by visiting economists by 1960s, and all these had some concern on the regional development because that regional development disparities were so highlighted in before independence and as well as after independence. And Mr. Maliyadde quite nicely narrate those episodes, the focal points of these interventions made by the government to having national plans with the subnational focus and special plans to the subnational or regional focus. But why all these plans since independence having so many names and so many subnational plans? I remember in a book, it has been quoted, Gamini Korea has once said that the first victim of regime changes is nothing but the policy. So the policies, rather than continuing from the previous regime, again we start from ground zero and we start national policy or regional policies once again from ground zero. So a lot of cost, lot of efforts have been put on. I think the planners, those who are in the retirement age or even after retirement, plays right on these experiences. And that knowledge is very valuable for the current generation and also for future generations. In that regard, I congratulate Mr. Maliyadde for contributing this with this paper, and this will be very much helpful for our generation and as well as for the next generation. And he has highlighted the subnational effort since independence, but he has given more prominent to 1970s onwards. Especially, he is fond of Mr. Premadas, I guess, because he has written something more on Premadas's real effort on regional development. being a person coming from his, where he has started the Gamudawa project, I still remember the day he came for that discussion to Badalgama. So we happened to be class school kids. We had the opportunity to just cycle through that Badalgama and sit with him and watch him what he was saying. So the Gamudawa project had really been a kind of a housing development plus some other a true development program which has been implemented in the country. Along with that, the 200 garment factory program, which has provided some kind of an impetus, directly affecting the rural masses. Janasaviya is another program. So he narrates nicely those programs which have been implemented throughout. And the panelists already, they have made some remarks on the program that have been implemented already. So I don't want to talk about that, especially for integrated rural development program, and thereafter the name has changed and incorporated a lot of other aspects also into the program. So we had so many programs and with lot of regional focus. But the main problem Mr. Maliyadde identify is that lack of focus and lack of comprehensiveness and lack of will to implement those programs. So what are the programs that are being implemented right now is well known to you better than me with the regional focus. I have identified there are some pages are missing in this narration, especially since 2004 to up to now. The Mahindra Rajapaksa government also had implemented certain rural development programs, and they were started from the so-called Gama Naguma, Maga Naguma, and all these Naguma programs are basically with the rural focus. So I think that part is missing, because that part has to be included in the paper, because otherwise it will be there will be a vacuum on that. So I think with all these good things, pluses, and there are certain deficiencies also in the paper. So I think this can be easily looked upon and amended. As an economic person, I would like to see more numbers, at least to substantiate those his claims and also comments. With some data, the paper will be enriched and also informative for a scholar to consider or consult in the future. Also, there are certain issues pertaining to the recommendations. So there are 10-15 recommendations he has made, and those recommendations are very valid and also very relevant in the current context. But the way it has been put on, lack of focus, so therefore it should be rewritten nicely and with a well focus. I'm quite sure that Mr. Maliyadde is capable of doing that by adding some information, and also to get a kind of a table kind of a thing would be very useful for a reader to narrate things or relate things of the programs he have been mentioning. Also, he has identified several reasons why the project or the regional rural development programs, they were failing. So those failures basically can be listed and would be prioritized one after another, and that would be useful for the planners to take up according to the priority. So what is most important? What are the main weaknesses? And then what are the strength of these programs that have been already implemented? Where we went wrong? And then what are the future plans, and what kind of future plans to be implemented with a regional rural focus? So these are certain observations I have made, and most importantly, since independence, especially after 1970, various governments have spent a hell of a lot of money, as Mr. Maliyadde mentioned, on regional development, but the success or the outcome was not satisfactory. Money has been spent, but outcome is not satisfactory. He says that 80% of these allocated funds for rural regional development projects, whatever the name it may be, 80% of this have gone on recurrent expenditure. So therefore, that may be a major weakness, and that weakness should be identified and addressed properly. And also, the continuity of rural regional development programs, whatever by name you are implementing those, whenever the regime changes happen, at least the policy, the bureaucrats, like in India, they have to say, whomever the minister may be, whomever the deputy minister may be, this is what we should do. And that is what is lacking in the current area or current bureaucrats. The bureaucrats can make a difference in this country. Being a secretary to a ministry for a 1-year period, I have experienced this. I'm telling you this by my own experience. If you decide, if you want, if you will, definitely you can make a change. By producing your reports or your articles, your experiences. Some experiences I know, they die with the individual. They don't talk about it. Even hard decision you have made, right? And those experiences, write something somewhere, and that will be recorded. That should be recorded for the future generation. I think in that sense, Somalia just made an initiative. That's the starting point. I'm sure he will continue this, and I'm expecting more from him. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ganesha Murthy. We have 2 more panelists. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Maringa Sumanadas. He is the General Secretary of Sri Lanka Economic Association. Economist, come lawyer, administrator, and researcher. I invite you to take 10 minutes out of our schedule. Thank you.
Reverend Professor Vimalratna in the chair, Mr. Maliyadde, the author of the paper, eminent panelist, and the distinguished participants. I think I am not an expert in planning. I think most of the distinguished contributors here are veterans in planning, national planning, regional planning. However, with my experience in the administration and in the academic, I will try to understand and review the paper, but not academically. Now, since there are certain recommendations, and since we accept all that generally the regional development as well as the national planning, these things have not been successful. That is why we are what we are today here. Therefore, what I will take a different approach to the whole problem, while appreciating Mr. Maliyadde's effort for recording all the stories, success as well as failures in the past. Now, what are the challenges that we have for the regional development? I myself do not know. Of course, Mr. Maliyadde explained to a certain extent what region is. It is not a define various things to various people. Now, as I see it, as an implementer, the players at the regional level, number one is the local authority, number two is the divisional secretariat. They are the big players at the regional level. Now, at the provincial level, of course, now we have provincial councils. Now, if you take the players, local authorities, they don't have the capacity. Now, I did a research about few months back with regard to the revenue of local authorities. I found that their revenue has come down. They just depend on the government. All the authorities are depending on the government for their sustenance. They don't have enough. 50% revenue is coming from the government. Then it is the same story with the provincial councils. Then from the other hand, we have divisional secretaries. They of course implement certain projects and they deliver services. They have some management skills, whereas local authorities, they don't have that kind of management skills. They are, of course, you have the people's representatives. So this sort of a situation they are at the regional level. This is the whole problem that we are facing. Now this has happened particularly after Provincial Council was established in 1987. When this was Provincial Council was established, you know, there were three lists we all know, according to which matters of national importance assigned to the central government, and other matters regional and local governments assigned. Now, the cross-cutting areas, national policy, national planning, national budgeting, those things were given to the central government. As a result, what has happened now is all the levels do all the subjects and functions. Now, if we have three levels of administration, three national, provincial and local. Local, of course, more than one players are there. Now, all these institutions, they do the same set of subjects. I do not know whether they follow the national sectoral framework where we have 26 sectors under which budgetary allocations are given to the various spending units, including provincial councils and local authorities. But I do not know whether those sectoral priorities are being followed by the other two tiers of the administration, provincial council and the local government. Now, because of this situation, we see that public services, for example, public services are delivered from all three levels, national, provincial and local. Delivery points as well as the services are delivered by these three levels. Now, I have found, for example, if you take the social protection sector, I have identified in my research 96 services, distinguished services provided to the 16 beneficiary categories. 96 services, distinguished services provided to 16 beneficiary categories. Now, only 40% of these 96 services are delivered by national, provincial and local as a single service. The balance 60% either 2 levels are doing same service or 3 levels are doing duplication of service delivery. If I take a small example, suppose disabled person, he is getting some kind of assistance from the national government. There are 2 ministries and 3 institutions directly getting the person in the village, and he also getting some cash allowances from the provincial council. He is also getting something from the local authority. So this is how services are being delivered. And if you take agriculture, I have identified 58 services delivered to 9 beneficiary categories. Now, 67% of agriculture services are coming from the national level, 67%. And 51% provided by 2 agencies at the national level, Mahavali and other agriculture ministry. 74% again delivered by national and PC, provincial council, 2 levels again. 75% by all 3 levels, national, provincial and local. Finally, at the village level also, 81% delivered by the village level. Of course, village level you find field officers who belong either to the national level or to the provincial level or to the local level. So this is the type of organization that we found at the regional level. So how can planning succeed in such a situation in the country? So this has happened because of the this 2 form of administration that we have. Now, after introduction of provincial council, we have devolved form, national, provincial council and the local authority. So that is a devolved line from the national level to rural level, elected, all the time elected, village, local authority elected, then the provincial council elected, national level elected. Other line is, of course, the line that has been there for many decades, that is center, district, division and the Grama Seva level. Now these 2 levels function separately, independently. I do not know what. Sometimes they deliver services, sometimes they are engaged in development. There is no coordination whatsoever. So there are 2 administrations running. Now, how can a regional development planning or development take place in such a situation? So this has to be addressed. Now how can we address this sort of a situation?
Time is virtually over. You can expedite, yes. Okay.
Yeah, just 1 minute. Now, for example, there is no clear demarcation of subjects. If the national level takes over the subject of national interest, then that's okay. And the provincial level, that regional type of issues. Then local level. That is one side of the story. Secondly, the sectoral framework at the national level is not being followed to the local level. I mean, it is not a known thing. And sectoral level is based on the Sustainable Development Goal framework, internationally connected there. But still, this is not happening at provincial council level and local level. Then there is no strong single administrative unit. Just imagine if we can have at the division 1 unit where you have a people elected council, that is the local authority, Pradesh Sabha. Then with the divisional secretary as the secretary, for example. Then if we can combine these 2, we can have a strong a strong administrative unit. What is happening now is there is no leadership. Now, leadership of division secretary is not accepted by many. It is accepted by certain people only, say for example, Gram Seva Niladhari and that set of people. And the leadership of Pradesh Sabha is not accepted. And the people, community, civil society, they are somewhere else. They are not connected to this scenario. And now the district office, district secretariat, Kacheri, they are doing only the elections now. They have no other functions. So this is the situation at the regional level. So unless we address these issues, and now if you take a country like Australia, they have the federal government, the state government, then city council, that's all. So the two levels decide policy and the city level deliver, operation level, finish. Now how many operation levels we have? So I don't take too much of time, my time is over. So I would suggest if we were to succeed in national planning as well as regional planning, in order to provide sustainable development, then we must address these structural issues. Otherwise, I don't think that next 75 years also we will be going like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maringa Sumanadasa. Now we are inviting to the last panelist, Mr. Sirisena Amarasekara. He is a Sri Lankan public servant and diplomat. He is the former Sri Lankan High Commissioner to South Africa, Mozambique, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Angola, Botswana, Eswatini. All from Africa. Yeah, so you are specialist in Africa.
Some of those countries I have never seen.
Seen? Okay. I kindly invite you to share your thoughts regarding subnational planning. Thank you.
Good afternoon, President and dear panelists. I don't know from where to start because this is a topic where you can talk hours and hours. I don't know from where to start. Of course, I thought initially to discuss about the institutional complications, but already it has been well explained, so I will not touch it. So that, when we talk about the subnational level planning, we use various terminologies like regional development planning, rural development planning, subnational level planning, and there are so many terminologies, and sometimes we are using those terminologies alternatively. But whatever, when we talk about the subnational level planning or the regional planning, the rural development also goes hand in hand together, especially when we talk about regional development planning. We cannot forget about the rural development. So the objective of the regional planning, always we says, that is to reduce the regional disparities. It is the general explanation, but I would like to say the purpose of regional planning or the rural development is to make available the urban facilities to the rural people. People who are living in rural areas, due to some reasons they happen to live in those areas, but they need urban facilities. That is why we go for rural development or regional development. Because like in the urban centers, they also need all those facilities. So that facilities can be provided directly, or we can improve the accessibility to those facilities in rural areas. One major thing that, when we are looking at the regional development or rural development or spatial development, because in our planning system, national planning is straightforward. There is no much, we can easily understand it. But when it comes to regional development or rural development or spatial planning, land use planning, there are so many definitions and it is multifaceted. And when and also some certain things you can't find the clear definitions and clear demarcation among these things. Some of these things are overlapping and we can use alternatively. The one major problem in our regional or the national planning system is lack of concern over the spatial aspect. I am happy today that one of the panelists, Mr. Jayasundara, is there, and also I can see another physical planner here. So in our planning system, whether it is regional planning or rural development planning or the national planning, we do not consider the spatial aspect at all. So as a result, we have created so many development issues in this country. Sri Lanka is a small country with a high density of population. So we are a country, more than any other country, we are a country who needs the spatial planning or the physical planning. But we don't look at it. When the national plan is taken into sectors, we take the sectoral breakdown. But sectoral plans never look at the spatial aspects. They locate their project activities wherever it is convenient. Wherever they can locate that, whether it may be a housing program. We don't look at anything. We look at whether there is a vacant land. We go and put up houses there. It may be a elephant corridor or whatever. It doesn't matter. Some land is there, we go and put up a housing scheme there. Having dealt with rural development for, I think out of my career, I think I have dealt with rural development for more than 25 years. One thing I have seen, most of the development issues that we are struggling today are due to the lack of spatial concern in planning and the development. If you go to any part of the country, we are talking about poverty alleviation. In this country, there are so many poverty pockets. I think majority of the poor people are found in these poverty pockets. Poverty pockets have been created by the government. Those are not natural result of natural process. Those have been created by the government. Now, normally, we have our traditional villages. When there is a spillover of population in those traditional villages, what we did since 1930s, even today, we find some land somewhere, maybe a hilltop, maybe a top of a rock or somewhere. We give 20 per acre or 10 per acre and settle people there. In the past, we used to call those village expansion scheme. So we never look at the suitability of land, whether that particular land is good for the settlement or not. We go and allocate the land and settle the people. People also use it as just a place to live because they cannot earn their living from that land, but they use it as just to put up a hut and live. But they will have to go somewhere else to work. So, sometimes in some places, we have allocated 2 acres, 3 acres like that in very unfertile land. Those land will never be able to develop. And also those will never be able to turn into a decent settlement. You cannot provide roads, you cannot provide electricity, you can provide water. So, those poverty pockets have been created by the government. And other problem is in our, infrastructure. We never look at the spatial aspect. If people go and settle somewhere or maybe in the top of a hill or somewhere, our politicians will try to provide road, electricity and water at huge cost. But recently I read something about poverty alleviation in China. In that program, there's one component called relocation of people. They have found to alleviate the poverty in such, unviable settlements is very costly. So instead, they have developed a program called relocation. They take those people out of the place and settle them in place where those facilities can be provided at a low cost. So, lack of this spatial concern, what is happening into the production system? Our cost of production is increasing very badly. So, transport cost. That, in the spatial plan, one thing we are always looking at seriously is the transport, to reduce the transport cost and minimize the need for transport. But, lack of, spatial concern over the planning or the development, we don't look at this transport aspect at all. We do our things, even sometimes, the cost of the transport of certain products may be costing more than the actual cost of production. So we are losing the competitiveness. So as Mr. Jayasundara said that, some time back he tried to establish one IT park. So that is, that type of, there is a zone for something that it reduces the cost of transport, cost of infrastructure, and really it improves the competitiveness. So what I would like to stress here again and again, that Mr. Maliyadde also have highlighted it in one place. I saw that as one of the weaknesses, that lack of spatial concern. I saw in his list of problems. I think this is something our policymakers,
time is
planners,
almost over.
Okay, should look at very seriously. I think my time is over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chadrasena Amarsekara Mahatmaya. Now, all the panelists contributed their ideas to the audience. I have been allocated a few minutes now. Originally, I have been allocated 10 minutes from 5:40 to 5:50. Now, because of time management issue, I have got only 4 minutes. Well, anyway, some time back, I met a innocent farmer, chain farmer, lived in Nikkavaratia. Middle of 1980s, then he was living in a temple. He used to read 5-year plan, 1970s, while he was working in his chain. He was confined to chain, no other contacts. What he did every day, when he was free, he read 5-year plan. Pass avrudu selasma. He had memorized everything there. The only thing you have to ask, what is industrial policy of 5-year plan? Mage aanduwa visin, he is reading. Well, I was thinking at least he received benefits out of 5-year plan, even though not the entire country. As if Robert Knox accidentally found a copy of Bible while he was wandering around the country. This innocent farmer found a copy of 5-year plan. He memorized everything. Well, when we look at subnational development, subnational planning, we have so many public officials at grassroots level. And we have different types of public agencies. Some of panelists were highlighting the importance of agriculture. And Dr. Sumanadasa did research recently, so he was able to highlight valuable points. All others. Well, now it is the responsibility of the Gamini Korea Foundation officials to filter suitable ideas out of the main presentation and ideas presented by panelists. As I repeatedly mentioned, the vision of the Gamini Korea Foundation is to do policy-oriented research work, not just to accumulate knowledge. So we have to find something to translate into practice rather than keeping in bookshelf. Well, my time is now over. Yes, 10 to 6. Now, I kindly invite Chadrasena Maliyadde Mahatmaya. Now, your second turn. You can give us your opinions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamadurane. And also I must thank all the panelists, very positive comments, and they have pointed out pluses and the minuses in my thinking, my thought process. Thank you very much. That will give me an opportunity to look at the paper again and improve. And there have been several things mentioned. Dr. Sumanadasa said that there are certain structural issues at the regional or the divisional and the local authority level. Local authority being political tier, divisional secretary being administrative tier. And I can remember that some time back when I was in the regional development division, I made a proposal to get the divisional secretary as the secretary to the local authority, because to bring the professionalism. All the divisional secretaries protested and they said no. Some of the Pradesh Sabha chairman were they are drivers earlier. So now how can we go and tell him, sir? So they said, so these are practical personal issues. There is no way you can resolve. And then, so we gave that up. Then also I made a proposal some time back to bring the provincial councils and the central government agencies to work together. Again, provincial councils protested. They said, we are independent organization, sovereign organization, don't touch our independent sovereignty. So then we gave it up. And some ministers said, no, that should not be done. So then Dr. Ganeshamurthy said that I am very fond of President Premadasa. Not that I am fond, but I appreciate his views. There was one, Robert England, I think Lloyd and Ratnayaka might remember, Amarathekara as well. He was the resident representative of the UNDP Colombo, and one day he met me and said, Mr. Maliyadde, with all due respect to you, I was the director of regional development, all due respect to you, Mr. Premadasa is a much better regional planner than you. So, and I agree, because that's a fact. Because his concepts, even the Janasavya was a small village level growth pole. And garment factory was another growth pole. He had Gammudava is another growth pole. And one day he told me that Maliyadde, this country cannot be developed with the garment factories. I introduced that to take the investors to the periphery. And now your duty is to get these investors to get into other work. Now, for instance, he mentioned about Galewala garment factory, and he gave me the name of the owner. Now, you go and talk to him and said that Galewala is a fruit and vegetable growing area. You ask that man to introduce a collecting center. So that's a far-reaching, far-looking way of the regional development. So I think that that's the correct approach. But anyway, I always admire him for such kind of thoughts. Then other reason is, there are various elements, the political intervention. Now, Mr. Amarathekar highlighted the spatial, ignorance of the spatial angle. But there was a time, the regional development division that is looking at the economic aspect, and the National Physical Planning Department and the UDA were under the same ministry. During Mr. Premadasa's period, there was a ministry of, Dr. Lloyd Fernando was the state secretary, Ministry of Policy Planning and Implementation, and all the departments under the same roof, same building. But we never talked. We never planned together. The National Physical Planning Department went on with the National Physical Plan. UDA went along with the UDA program. We went along with our program. We talked. Even for a drink, we did not meet. So that was there, So that maybe, that is due to our personal rivalry or something, but it is not happening. So we talk of coordination. Yes, coordination is not there. But how do you bring the coordination? Now, this is the issue. There have been several coordinating committees, district coordinating committee, then the division level coordinating committee, provincial level coordinating committee. But we go there, have a cup of tea, come back, and we forget the coordination. And also, Mr. Amarathekar said, rather than bringing the development to people or the regional facilities, bring the people to where the facilities are available. So that is right. I agree. Now, in many other countries, there are residential areas, there are commercial areas, all that are carved out. But in Sri Lanka, it's not. If you go along any public road, any highway, all along the road, there are people living. So, and as you go interior, it's empty. So that's a fact. And those are the historical reasons, but we live with the history. We love history. We like to live in the history. Even I related some historical facts. But we don't use the history experience or the failures to development. Now, I can remember that famous place, the Lankagama, adjoining Singharaja, you can reach from Galle or Matara. And when we were doing the southern area development work, that the people in Lankagama, they have about 50 families, they wanted some infrastructure, especially access road. So then I can't remember, but I was asked to go and see that. So when I went there, the people really need some access. But I suggested, why don't you bring those people down and then provide all the facilities? Take them into one place and then provide all the facilities, infrastructure, the housing, the access, all that, rather than constructing the road. Once you construct the road, then there will be looters, there will be people who will go into the forest and then bring the trees down. All that happened. I said that you bring that down, but that did not happen, because however much we talk of this technical aspect, the personality comes first, then the political interest. Political interest, we cannot. I can remember that we wanted to set up economic center in Ambilipitiya. So I hired the person from Agrarian Research Training Institute, Hector Kobagadu, and then we went and saw the place, and he did a fine study. And Dr. Rupasena, now he was a professor in Rajarata University, and then he said that this is the ideal place. And he said that the economic center should not be handled by the traders, it should be handled by the producers. You set up a producer association, strengthen them, let them run it. But in Dambul and all that, it has become traders now. Farmers are growing onions and potatoes, but the traders are bringing it down from Colombo. So those are the sort of difficulties we are unable to tackle as bureaucrats, and we quite agree that the bureaucrats are not paying perhaps attention, but what to do, you know, bureaucracy has to work within a system, and you cannot, sometimes you can make changes, but we cannot do all the changes. So with this, I must thank all the panelists and Hamdru for the excellent, positive, and even the negative comments. They are quite useful, but they there are sense. And when we talk of the what is the area development, spatial development, I can remember this Hambantota port came. One thing, the technical feasibility is there, but first idea came from Ananda Kularatna. He was a southerner hailing from Hambantota. Second, it came from Mahinda Rajapaksa because he is also hailing from Hambantota. But the ports authority people vehemently opposed that. I can remember that, you know, when we went, the chairman, I can even remember, chairman of the ports authority told me, Mr. Maliyadde, the constructing of a seaport is not like constructing of a bus stand. So that is what, because they had some vested interest. Their children were going to Colombo school, they are living in Colombo 7, and they had other vested interest. They did not want to go to Hambantota. And then I said, yes, I am a layman, I do not know the technicalities, but I can understand the difference between a seaport and a bus stand. So, but then very same person, during Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa's period, signed the agreement with the people for the Hambantota port. But Hambantota port and this Amarathekara mentioned about the southern corridor, the issue is
time is over.
Thank you very much, Amade. Technical feasibility there, but we have, as planners, the man-made, the naturally technical feasibility is there. The proximity, availability of land, and all those are natural factors. But the man-made factor is missing. That is to make it viable, economically viable project. So these are there, and my time is over, and I am running out of the ideas as well. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Maliyadde Mahatmaya. Well, we are living in a dynamic world. Globalization is going on, and one panelist correctly pointed out, third industrial revolution and fourth industrial revolutions. Now fourth industrial revolution is going on. There are some ups and downs. Under Trump's, globalization declined to some extent, and recent COVID-19, again, globalization was affected. Ups and downs are there when you are talking planning regional development. Not the same rules, same setup. Now we are talking about global value chains, global productions. Regional planning are also changing. In the past, I was proposing at least we have to maintain sleepless few regional local governments to boost regional development. When you look at some regional city centers, as Maliyadde Mahatmaya correctly pointed out, and some others, vegetable, fruits collections are there. In addition to that, other models you would find, say for example, Maharagama. From 3 a.m., town is alive. Textile trade. You can simply transform city into a sleepless center. So people from distant areas can come to that center to collect dresses. In the past, Dambulla was like that, not now. There are some other centers, for example. And we have agrarian service centers, same way, not dynamic, not innovative. I do not know if they are actually working. That is something else. Regional development, we have got more than enough public officials, institutions. For the regional development, my personal opinion, we have to promote the private sector. As Dr. Ganeshamurthy initially pointed out, 200 garment factories. Something similar to that, not the same. Now we are living in a different world. Well, now floor is open to the audience. Q&A. You can raise your question. We have the main presenter here. Eminent panelists are also here. If all are not capable enough, many distinguished, eminent resource persons are sitting in the audience itself. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, now the floor is open to Q&A. Thank you.
So, to my knowledge,
please tell us your name and institutional affiliation first. That would be good for all. Thank you.
my name is Dilhan Tutehewage. I am a former committee member of the Sri Lanka Economic Association. I am chairman and managing director of Dawson's Private Limited, a private real estate company. And also, yes, well, anyway, okay, I'll get to the question. Now, my question is, I haven't seen many subnational plans for even the regions, no, anyway, I mean, even at ministry level. Based on the definition of subnational plans, I think some of the ministries also can make economic development plans. President has stated that the Sri Lankan government doesn't have a plan for the national economy. And at regional level also, I haven't seen many proper regional development plans. So can someone tell me where are the places that have some good economic development plans? And if other places that are not supposed to make plans are not making plans, then what is holding them back?
Yes, your question open to all. Yes, yes. And others?
Sorry?
No. Other questions, I mean. Similar questions.
So I am Gauridasan. I am working as a consultant in Sri Lanka Institute of Development Administration. My question is, still we are talking about that whether the regime is changed, the policy is put in the basket. And doctor says that we don't have the proper administrative system. There are mixed and there are duplications. So it's highly related to the governance issues. So if then sir mentioned that regarding there is no connection between the physical planning and the economic planning. So all these are connected with the governance issues. So whether we are not concerning about the governance or we are avoiding the governance and we are focusing on the other side? Or first we have to focus on the governance. Am I correct? So please.
Yes. Who is going to start? 2 questions are there. Okay.
Thank you. Starting from the first question, but I'll take it to a different direction, which we all have forgotten. One of the key issues we have is that we don't understand the fact more resources mean more problems. Now, I'll relate that to Hambantota. Sorry to contradict you. Hambantota proposal was first proposed by R.E.C.L. Vikramanayake, not by any politician, not by Mahinda, no one. R.E.C.L. Vikramanayake. He wrote a booklet called Why Hambantota? Fantastic tiny booklet. In addition to many details given, he came out with 3 factors. Number 1, depth. The best place to have a harbor in this Asian region, depth. Depth remained same from 1905 to 2000. Not even an inch got filled up because that was safe from monsoons. Number 2, proximity to international sea route. Number 3, enough lands, developable lands, highly demanded by some of the major industrial establishment, particularly automobiles and shipbuilding. Demands primarily came from South Korea, China, and Japan. Now, he started, then professionals got together, and he himself spent his own money. He's a ship owner and a specialist in underwater construction. That is how we got into the business. And then only politicians came. Then UDA came into scene, having realized what he proposed in his paper, economic activities. They came out with not Hambantota seaport development, Greater Hambantota development that covered almost entire Hambantota district and more, and even getting into Montreal district. What next happened? My first statement. More resources, more problems. It's a curse, not a strength. What happened was, having recognized the significance of Hambantota Harbour, I am not going to mention the names of those countries due to ethical reasons. 2 countries, that's what we came to know, prevented international institutions like ADB, JICA, World Bank to assist Hambantota. They prevented. Because port plays a key role in their economies. 3rd country, our big brother, they started another project called Setu Samudra to block Hambantota. Fortunately, some extreme religious groups agitated against the Indian government, saying that the Rama built a temple, and there, between Sri Lanka and the strip, Sri Lanka and India, if you dredge the canal, that will be destroyed, and we are going to be affected. We are even fortunate, NASA published an aerial photograph, an in-depth one, that proved there are some structures, so Indian government had to set back. Right? During this period, war period, continuously there were agitations and criticisms in almost all the international media against Mahinda Rajapaksa and the government based on human rights violation. But one of the only one article written by British journalist, 3-page, in Financial Times, in Times magazine. He started scolding the United States and all the European countries. 3 reasons. He said, you have fought with one of your good friends, a small friend, but a good friend, without understanding the significance of geographical locations. Second point, he says, do you stupid people understand that there's a place in Sri Lanka called Hambantota? Do you stupid people understand that that is best harbor in this part of the world for a seaport? Since you all have fought with him and you went against with Sri Lanka, they found a new friend who is much more stronger than you all put together, China. Will you understand, will you imagine that Hambantota is going to be their naval base in the future, in this part of the world? So what happened? No one was, everyone who was interested in was prevented to invest in. That is what happened to Hambantota. Secondly, suddenly there was another investment came through ADB or World Bank, I remember, you must be remembering, to develop Gold Harbour. That was rejected by the British government in 1905 due to many reasons, but suddenly came to distract. On the top of that, another huge project came to Hambantota. That is for what? Whatever left government development. All the top ministries, agriculture, everyone supported. And minister in charge, another Rajapaksa said, when are you going to realize this beautiful map of Hambantota Puhunupura development? I am going to have my project, and he also took that. What happened? All the lands that were earmarked for heavy industries, all were taken for agriculture. Now you find papaya and all that kind of things. They are not heavy industry, right? This what happened, that part. So the great outcome was destroyed. On the top of that, then the government, finally they went with China. They really did not understand the significance of harbour port. What they did was they went with China. They could have easily gone for PPP, getting big players in the industry. What they come say, you take now the South Harbour. One big player, they bring business. The very same thing could have been done there. So they destroyed the company. So what happened was there was plan. Implementation was there. We did not understand the global interventions to destroy our economies. This is that part. And many areas like that, not only Hambantota, there's also Trincomalee, a big plan. Again, that was destroyed. So what we do not understand is the significance of international interventions in our economy. More you have resources, more you have problems. Sorry.
Thank you. The second question, who is going to answer? Yes, governance. Dr. Sumandas is a specialist in that area, I guess. Governance issues, as you highlighted. Yes. Root cause for regional backwardness is governance. Yes. Yes.
For example, where are the institutions that have economic development, public economic development?
Well, it's like this. This is the prime issue that both he mentioned and I also mentioned. You can't take economic development separated from spatial plan. So the spatial plan that was prepared for national physical plan is finally is spatial distribution of investment. Economics is there. So all got together. They worked for more than 2.5 years and prepared that. There's an economic plan in it. That is why they distributed development in 5 regions. The biggest region they discussed was what he mentioned in his paper. That's North Central and part of Eastern Province, where 5 main cities were located. Many other reasons. Say for why one of the key reasons why that was given the prime consideration even than Western Province was, moment you locate the whole main development area there, you are also addressing the ethnic issues. Muslims, Tamils, Sinhalese, all. Because in more investments, people interact. More people get interacted, so all the issues will diminish. So economic plan plus spatial plan, both were indicated there. On the top of that, there were regional plans. Again, economics came in. For an example, there's an economic plan, spatial plan prepared for Uva region. One of the fundamental proposals there was to bring Uva capital to Montragala from Badulla. It is related to environmental issues. Approved, accepted, but not implemented. The issue is that.
Thank you very much. Now we are moving to the second question. Governance issues.
Thank you. Of course, the most important issue is the governance. Now, if you look at regional issues or national issues, the root cause, we can go to the governance. Unfortunately, that is not been really addressed. For example, now provincial councils were established for a purpose, but the government actually not only the policy, budgetary, planning aspects were taken, but also the subject as well. So even the devolved subjects, most of the things have been done by the center as well. That is why the duplication arises that I explained to you earlier. There is one aspect. Now, another example, now monies are allocated by the budget for the local authorities as well as provincial councils for development work as well as recurrent expenditure. Now, development work, the decisions are taken at the coordinating committees. These coordinating committees used to be headed by officials before, which is also not satisfactory thing, but later on these committees were started to be chaired by the politicians. Now, politicians think only about their vote banks. So when they decide a certain road to be built up, it is no feasibility considered, no maximum use for the people considered. They want to help. One other thing is, even though we have a devolved system nicely on the ground, local authorities, provincial councils, and the national level, what is happening is the center is preferred to do all the development work through the officials, say district level and divisional level. That line, they are using that line. They don't like to strengthen the people elected local authorities and the provincial councils. I mean, this is the nature of the center. So we, unless they understand these things and do objectively these things, the governance issue will be there.
Thank you, Dr. Sumanadasa. We have 5 more minutes. We can answer only one question, I guess.
Kumarasiri, DG National Planning. Mr. Maliyadde has given a lot of examples, investment in the rural regional development or subnational level. After independence, every government has spent huge money for the regional development. According to the central bank recent report says that Western province contributed to the GDP 42%, whereas North province only 4%, 10 times higher the Western province. Now, are we fail in the regional development? Why is that? Whether it is contribution from the private sector in the Western province rather than the government, and are we need to get the investment from the private sector rather than the government investment into the regional or rural development? That's it.
Yes, question to Mr. Maliyadde or somebody else? Anyone? Yes, those who have not talked. Yes. Yes, Dr. Ganeshamurthy.
It's a relative issue. I think if you look at 10 years back, that was 56% contributed by the Western province. Now it came down to 40%. So things will be improving. I think we don't have to be very pessimistic on that. So strengthening the rural and regional economic infrastructure and other productive capacities, I think in future with proper plans, proper mechanisms, and we have understood now the weaknesses, and weaknesses were spoken in this forum. I think if these are the weaknesses, how we are going to address those weaknesses practically, right? In this forum we can propose many things, but practically how can we implement those weaknesses and prevent those weaknesses? And that practical aspect we need to think more appropriately and more most of the issues are coming from the governance side. So how are we going to improve that? What are the proposals that we can make so that a group of people or group of the bureaucrats come together and made some proposals and make the people aware, the general public aware about these problems. And there are, I think, the political authority also will listen to not individually the bureaucrats, but a group of bureaucrats, if you can form something and put a proposal, I think there will be a possibility of the political authority to listen to it.
Thank you, Dr. Ganesh Murthy. Yes, experience from African continent? Yes. Yes.
Well, that, when we talk about the rural development and regional development, we, in Sri Lanka, we talk proudly about one thing, that Sri Lanka, we don't have a high level of migration from rural areas to urban areas. That in a way, it is, we can praise it as an achievement, but in the long run, I would say it is not an achievement, because we have kept the people in rural areas without allowing them to come to better, areas with better facilities. So we have not allowed them to migrate to other areas and resolve their problems on their own. Of course, government has taken over the resolving their problem. The responsibility has taken over by the government. And if you take African countries, it is quite different, because they don't have something called rural areas. That, there are small pockets where some tribal groups are living, but 90% of the people are living in and around large urban areas, urban regions. So people are migrating to urban areas. Maybe they must be having a bad life in slums and other things, but they all are earning an income, unlike in our rural people in Sri Lanka. Because, when the people have migrated to an urban area, they all have some access to urban facilities, education, electricity, running water. They may not have the recent shelter due to certain reasons, but those countries, those governments are really providing them shelter as well, step by step. And that if you take South Africa, now that is one country where they have paid a very good, very high attention for this spatial aspect of development. Just because the sector plan has something, they don't allow those activities to be located somewhere. For everything, they have shown that area or the location where it should be located.
Okay, thank you, Amarasekara Mahatmya. We are running out of time. Now, 6:26. Time for vote of thanks. In addition to points I highlighted at the beginning, globalization is going on, and also fourth industrialization is going on, and Chinese OBOR initiatives, they are planning to complete the project 2049. Then they are going to celebrate 100 years of Chinese Revolution. Are we exploiting opportunities offered by the global changes? Thank you very much. Now it is time to deliver vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Reverend Professor, for chairing the session. And ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, as we conclude today's insightful discussion on subnational planning, organized by the Gamini Korea Foundation under the initiative of the Sri Lanka Sri Lanka Innovators Forum, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to everyone who was involved today. Our deepest gratitude goes to Venerable Professor Vijitapura Vimalaratna for keeping everyone on time. And also, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists, Mr. Hemanta Jayasundara, Mr. W.A.D.S. Gunasinghe, Dr. M. Ganeshamurthy, Dr. Maringa Sumanadasa, and Mr. Amarasekara for sharing your expertise, experience, and insight and enriching our understanding of subnational planning. Special acknowledgement goes to the chairman of the Gamini Korea Foundation and our deputy chairman who is present today and our board of directors, and our Chief Operating Officer and the entire foundation staff for their tireless effort in organizing this event today. Lastly, I would like to remind you that our next session on good governance will take place on July 7th, promising a high-level meeting with a prominent speaker and important stakeholders. Thank you for all for your valuable time and your contribution, and we look forward to continuing our pursuit of prosperous future for Sri Lanka. Please note that tea will be served outside, and I wish you have a pleasant evening. Thank you very much.